Today's episode of Beyond the Mask is presented by the insurance specialists at Bright Think Wealth Strategies. Find the disability insurance coverage that fits you best right now. Email Robert Smith at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. The show is also made possible by the team at CRNA Financial Planning. Get a free consultation today to be guided through the complexities of investing and financial planning. Just visit crnafinancialplanning.com. We'd also like to thank Helping Hands and OSA EMR for their support of the show. And don't forget, listening to our podcast can earn you Class B credits. For more information on how you can submit them, check out the CE Credit tab on our website, beyondthemaskpodcast.com.
Hey, Jeremy, I want to take a moment to tell our listeners about something I'm really excited about.
Sharon, what's that?
The North Carolina Association of Nurse Anesthetists and the South Carolina Association of Nurse Anesthetists are having an interstate conference, a state meeting with the two organizations coming up in just a few short weeks. Of course, last year it was planned and, COVID kind of ruined that for us. It was on Zoom. It was great. It was still a great meeting, but not this year. We're still planning for it to be in person.
That's right. And this year, live and in person, it's going to be at the Renaissance Hotel in Asheville, which I'm looking forward to, one of my favorite cities in North Carolina. Mm-hmm. I'm sure others are actually looking forward to going someplace other than a computer or in their home office.
Well, I know I am. The meeting's going to be September 10th through the 12th. And there's still time to register. People can get about 22 CEs while you're up there. You can take a tour of Asheville's awesome microbreweries. We're going to have an awesome PAC event. I happen to know the DJ for the PAC event very well. We'll have, of course, the state business meetings. You'll have an opportunity to network and visit with exhibitors. And with both states coming together, we'll have lots of exhibitors. So I look forward to seeing people there.
Including us. We'll be there.
That's right. We're going to be doing some podcast taping on site while we're there. But please come and join us and enjoy all the great sights and sounds of a destination in the mountains. And it's got to be a little bit cooler than it is down here.
That's right. So we don't want our listeners to miss it. You can register at ncana.com or sccrna.org.
We're looking forward to seeing you in Asheville. You will not want to miss this meeting.
Welcome to Beyond the Mask, Innovation and Opportunities for CRNAs with Jeremy Stanley and Sharon Pierce. We know you spend your day caring for your patient's best interests. On our show, we want to care for you. Join us as we leave the operating room and learn the latest in the CRNA industry. Beyond the Mask starts in 10, 9, 8, 7...
Welcome to Beyond the Mask. I'm Jeremy Stanley, and I've been working with CRNAs for over 23 years, and I'm married to one. And my co-host is
Sharon Pierce.
Sharon's a practicing CRNA for over 20 years, a past president of the ANA, the NCANA, and she's held many other leadership roles. As usual, our goal with every episode is to educate and enlighten CRNAs, and I think our topic today is definitely going to do that. And Sharon, what time is it?
It's time to wake up, Jeremy.
I think it is. Sharon.
Good morning.
I can see you.
Are you scared?
Welcome to the studio.
I know. It's
good. It's been a while.
I know. You going to find our other microphone?
Yeah. We got to figure out what happened to that other microphone. But at least we have enough for us and our guests this morning.
I know.
Right?
We do.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm excited. I'm excited to be back in the studio. I'm excited for our guest today, who was supposed to be our guest at the ANA meeting.
I know. I'm so bummed that we're not going to get to have the meeting. I was so looking forward to it, to seeing everybody. I hadn't even seen the Fab Four. Well, I see Carol.
Yeah.
Because Carol lives in Minnesota. So whenever I visit the twins, I get to see Carol. But I haven't seen Tracy nor Jackie in, a year and a half.
Wow.
That's the longest time that we've never been together. So we always give each other prizes at the meetings. And so I mailed their prizes to them yesterday.
Oh.
Oh, and they're so cool. This will air after they get them, so I'll tell you what they are. I had these coffee mugs made, and it has the four of us, and you could design it with the right color hair, and we're sitting there, and it's got our names underneath, and then it says, we'll be best friends forever, and then when we are so old we forget, we'll be best friends again, or something like that. It's really
So it's not
cute.
actual pictures, it's like caricatures.
Yeah.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah. It's
gotcha.
really, really cute.
I can have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, yeah, you sure
Maybe
could.
I should get you one, like me and you on a little coffee mug, a caricature.
Well, I like it. We
Yeah.
can sit here in the studio and drink, even though you don't drink
I don't drink coffee, but
You
I'll drink tea.
You
Yeah,
drink
so.
tea like a girl.
Oh yeah. Coffee's bad for you. I can't do it.
That is not true.
Well, that if you say it, it's true, right? Isn't that
Put
the
it
way
on
this
Facebook.
world works now?
If you put it on Facebook, it's true. That's what it is.
Well, we want to introduce our guest today. We have with us Mr. Richard Flowers, and AKA known as Richie. Richie, thanks for coming in this morning.
Hey, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. And it just
Very glad to be here.
so happens that you are here in Winston-Salem with us at the illustrious Wake Forest University program. And
Whoop, whoop.
yeah, Sharon's alma mater and my wife's alma mater. So we're lucky to have you here, and thank you for coming in.
Well, I'm happy to be here. I didn't know I was going to be back in the studio for the first time with you guys, so I feel a little honored.
But it's more fun in the studio.
It is. It is.
I mean, it's okay over Zoom, but there's just something about being in person and sitting here with your headphones and the boom
Yeah.
and everything. You just really get into it, I think.
Yeah, and you know what? Everybody sounds better in the studio.
You're not kidding.
So that's
no
another thing.
internet instability, none of that. So, listeners, there'll be no scratching in the background, no slowdowns, no anything.
Yeah. Well, Richie, we're going to talk today about something that is very important in the nurse anesthesia community, and really dealing with cultural humility. And we're going to spend some time talking about that, which I think is very important. But first, why don't you tell our listeners a little bit more about you and your background?
Yeah, I've been a CRNA for 25 years. Maybe 25 years next year. So I practice in every type of environment you can imagine, from academic to independent practice. For 10 years before I moved to North Carolina, I had an independent high-risk OB practice, all CRNA. So it was a great time in my life. And my time in New Mexico, I really learned a lot about different cultures, as you can imagine, being a
I bet.
white kid from the South moving to New Mexico, and which is really a melting pot of different cultures, and stuck my foot in my mouth a lot and learned a few things here and there, but that kind of shaped some of my discussion and interest in this, even though I didn't really know it at the time. When I moved to North Carolina, I was mid-D&P program, which was a little bit of a shock in itself to me to do that mid-program. Sharon can probably appreciate that, trying to change jobs, careers, and move cross-country in the middle of a D&P program was,
Oh, my goodness.
was a lot of fun. But when I moved here, I immediately started, making inroads with the Wake Forest program, because my long-term goal at that point was to teach full-time, and that's what I do now. So I'm assistant professor, faculty. I have a really cool title at the program. I'm an educational innovator. I love that title.
Isn't that cool?
That is cool. I like that title.
So I hope that get to keep that title. But yeah, so I'm full-time faculty, and really enjoy, all aspects of what that entails. I'll tell you, it was a very sad day in the office when the news launched that we weren't going to Austin. And then, of course,
Such a great city.
having to tell the students that too was even worse. So,
Were you having a lot of students to
yeah,
go?
we did. Our rising senior class, almost the entire class was going.
My
Wow.
entire class went.
Well, I guess it's
Should
better to
be.
be safe than sorry, but I know everyone misses being together, and the things going on in Austin right now, that it doesn't look good down there. It's kind of interesting. I just got back from Costa Rica for 2 weeks, and we went on this hiking excursion, and there was another couple with their 2 kids on it with us, and he just so happened to be an ED doc in Austin.
Oh, really?
Which was interesting. So we were talking about this stuff and how it had gotten bad in Austin. And he said, "You guys are still having your meeting?" it's like, oh yeah, we'll be down there,
Right.
the 13th. And so it was very interesting timing on that. So, but Richie, let's kind of talk about this topic. You've named it cultural humility. And, why is this important? Why is it so important, especially at this time?
I think the short answer is it's no secret we have a diversity problem in our profession, right? When you look at nurse anesthesia and you look at our demographics compared to the general population, it's far different. If we use the term people of color, right? Our profession is maybe 11%. I think I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but about 11% that is not Caucasian,
right,
in our profession. Whereas the average population in America is pushing 40%. I think the studies all say now that by 2043, Caucasians will be a minority in the United States of America. So we don't represent the population. That is somewhat of a point of contention if you discuss that within our profession. Mm-hmm. In general, people tend to say, the best get in and it is what it is.
Right.
When it comes to admissions, and I've been heavily involved in admissions in the last couple of years. And yeah, that's true, but there's a lot of things we can do that's a better job. But back to why it's important. It doesn't come down to just the fact that we don't look like the population. It comes down to the fact that difference creates health disparities, which leads to outcome differences, which leads to dollars and just outcome differences, right? Differences in health among populations. And it's really hard for people to wrap their minds around that because in the anesthesia, and especially in nurse anesthesia, we tend to silo what we do. We tend to think, I'm walking in, I'm the expert, I'm putting this person to sleep. It doesn't matter whether I connect with them. All that matters is whether or not I know what I'm doing and I do a good job in the OR. And the end of our perspective or the edges of our silo is when we drop that patient off in the PACU. They look good, great, bye. I did a great job. So in our minds, we don't really think much about how we contribute to more global outcomes in our patients and the healthcare systems, and that's really bad that we're so siloed. But the fact is we do.
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's a way around that. But what you say is exactly true. I see them. You've got just a few minutes, and then you give them Versed. Then they don't remember you. And that's one of the reasons why we've been the best kept secret in healthcare, because if
nobody knows who you are after you dose them a little bit, right?
And then, if they remember you during the surgery, that's bad.
That's really bad, yeah.
And then you do drop them off, and you've got to have a short turnover time, and you've got to be on your next case in the next 10 minutes. And that's in a hospital, in outpatient, it's 2.
Yeah.
But I do have one question. Whenever we look at the makeup of the profession as a whole, is that a representation of an upstream problem? Because we have to get our people from ICU nursing.
It is. It partially is. So nursing does a little better job than we do. Medicine does a little better job in some aspects than we do. And being involved in some of the inclusion and diversity and outreach committees at the School of Medicine, see that they do a much better job of convincing, in particular, like young African-American males, young black males, into going into medicine. Unfortunately, when we think about trying to convince 6th graders, which is really where this has to begin. And we talk about this in our program. Dr. Courtney Brown's done a great job with pipeline programs, reaching out to youth and saying, hey, you should consider this as a profession. And there's other people out there, Dr. Lena Gould, other people in the profession. There's a really interesting program I just saw on the AANA website called CAP Incorporated. I think they're out of Baltimore. And they have programs specifically reaching like middle school, high school youth and talking about nursing professions and nurse anesthesia included. But we're not reaching kids when we need to reach them to get them into nursing. And medicine does a really good job of convincing those people. And it's a hard choice. You have talented young people to say, hey, you should be a doctor. or
Right.
you should be a nurse.
Well, you've been in anesthesia almost as long as I have been. And when we were being trained, anesthesiologists were very diversified, but
Yes.
it's for a whole different reason.
Yeah, it was a different
because of they used to call them FMGs, foreign medical graduates, because anesthesia was seen as a loser went into anesthesia.
Really?
They could not fill the anesthesiologist spots, so they purposely went to the foreign medical graduates. Sandy
interesting.
can tell you all of this in much better detail than I can. So every anesthesiologist basically that I trained with were Afghan, Pakistani, Italian, lots of Indians. And then once it became lucrative, you could just see the shift. I would love to see the numbers now about the diversity, because it's not like that anymore. Once it became lucrative, then American graduates, American medical students started going into anesthesia once it became lucrative.
Well, you know, the first thing that pops into my mind is historically, back when all of our parents were growing up, nursing was seen as a female profession.
Right.
You know, and I look at nursing now, especially nurse anesthesia, that is about 50-50. I mean, it's about 50% female, about 50% male. First, that gives me hope that obviously things can change. Second thing was, one of the reasons males started going into nurse anesthesia was because of the money factor, making good money.
Well, actually, I would argue it's the other way around.
With the females?
No, I think it was an autonomy issue.
Ah.
The men wanted to go where they could, because men are used to having their own way.
Yeah, that's true. It's
really
And
the
so, and
only-
especially white men.
Yeah. That's the only metric that we do okay in.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Actually.
And so I think it was the autonomy piece that they wanted to begin with. And I think my lucky stars that it was men coming in, because that's where the money would go.
Yeah.
The profession would have remained feminized and the salaries would have remained low.
Yeah.
We even know in the nurse anesthesia profession that the males will make about $18,000 more a year than the female CRNAs.
And that represents the general population as well.
That still blows my mind
That's
when you
there's a
say that. I mean,
disparity.
but it's the same in my industry, Sharon. I mean, you know, overwhelmingly,
women make more than y'all?
no. I mean, but
That's whenever
overwhelmingly,
we
we don't
reach
have a lot of diversity. We don't have, you know, as many females. You know, the industry's trying to change that now, but it is a huge trend in our industry.
Actually, that's interesting, not surprising.
Yeah.
But when do we truly have representation? I'm thinking about Congress. I mean, I'm thinking about, you
Yeah.
know, that's where
No,
I
you're
always
right.
go with this.
You're right.
And 24% of all legislative seats in the country are occupied by women, but yet we
Yeah.
represent 51% of the population. But I guess all of this, we know that there's a problem.
Right.
And what is it? The first step is awareness that
Yeah.
you've got a
It
problem.
certainly is, because in context, you know, if I were to launch this on Facebook today and just go out and say, hey, you have a diversity problem in anesthesia, immediately there would be comments begin saying, well, we shouldn't lower the bar.
Right.
That is the most arrogant, demeaning thing to say, that you would even need to lower the bar. And I will just say that now. We don't need to lower the bar. There are plenty of qualified, very smart minority students out there, nurses, high school students. It's just convincing them that we're the path.
Right.
Business has done a great job. If you look at GRE scores going into business school,
Yeah, much
and
better.
black males, super high GRE scores.
Right.
They've just done a really good job of convincing them that that's a path to take early in life.
Yeah.
As a CRNA, you spend years preparing yourself for this career, so we don't want to see you lose out on any of the income you've worked so hard to earn. The best way to protect yourself and give you the confidence that a major life event won't disrupt your financial future is through disability insurance. We've known disability income specialist Robert Smith for many years and have seen the work he's done with nearly 2,000 CRNAs over multiple decades. He can help identify any gaps in your existing coverage and fill those gaps by finding the best value on a policy. Contact Robert and let him know you heard about him on our podcast. Send him an email at rsmithjr rsmithjr@financialguide.com. That's rsmithjr@financialguide.com. Or call them at 504-394-6557. Protect your greatest asset as a CRNA, yourself and your ability to earn a living by adding disability insurance to your financial plan.
Well, Richie, we're talking about this stuff. I mean, obviously there has to be barriers to diversity, and why hasn't it happened up until now, and what are the barriers moving forward?
You talk about just the general barriers of the things we just discussed, right? It's a pipeline problem, convincing especially young black males to go into nursing.
Right.
That's been difficult and has a lot of barriers that I don't have time to go into all those. There's a lot of barriers involved in that.
Even though now the ANA president is a black male.
Absolutely.
We just interviewed him.
And there is an interesting contrast in that, did you know that when you look at black people in nursing in general, the highest number of people seeking DNP and higher degrees are represented in the black community?
You know what, though?
Wow.
That would kind of make sense to me. And I'll say this as the only female sitting in the room. Female surgeons are usually so much better than their male counterparts because they have to be very high achievers to work in a male-dominated profession. So I could see that they would feel the need to go to the top level, so they felt like that they were seen as, and I could be totally wrong with that because I've not walked in those shoes, but I could see the need to feel like I've got to overachieve for
I think
acceptance.
That comes
Does that make sense?
It does, and I think it comes to, this is a personal theory, and I've heard this before, but for advanced practice nursing professions that are clinical, if you're an underrepresented minority who went through nursing school, and this is even a contrast with medical school, you've been in a clinical setting. You've experienced racism. You've experienced being treated differently by patients, providers, other nurses. You've lived it in nursing in school. You've lived it in the clinical realm. So why would you want to continue experiencing that? Medical students come into medical school with no clinical experience.
Right.
They've been undergrad students, right? So I think it might be easier to recruit those underrepresented groups into medicine, into business, because they haven't experienced what it's like to be in a clinical realm and have that environment, a somewhat racist environment, actions against them, which we know they experience that.
Well, women, I'll give you an example. Women do too. And I just want to throw that out there. And good Lord, a black female probably even more so for sure. But I just went to work in a hospital again for the first time in 16 years. And I was walking with a black male CRNA, and he was precepting me, and somebody come up and asked a question, and as we're walking down, he looks at the black male and goes, "Thank you, doc," to him. He didn't think I was a doc, and I am a doctor now because Yale says so. But I just thought that might be what it feels like.
Or even worse, I recently had a student tell me a story about they were in the OR, and the person who was the CRNA they were working with said, "I'm going home. Someone else is going to be taking over." And a black male walked in the room and kind of walked up to the head of the bed, and they thought, well, who is this? Is this housekeeping?
Oh.
Never,
yeah.
it didn't cross
I've
their
heard a lot
mind
of
that this
them
was a
say that.
CRNA coming into the room.
Yeah.
So if you're a nursing student and you've experienced those actions, continuing in an additional clinically based career, there may be a barrier. In our own profession, I think when you're not diverse, you don't promote diversity. And I think our largest within the profession, and the reason I think this whole cultural humility idea is important in the nurse anesthesia profession, is our own people don't understand the reason. Like I said, The first discussion that happens is, oh, we have to lower the bar. No, we don't have to lower the bar. It's arrogant. It's a slap in the face to all the underrepresented CRNAs out there who made it.
Right. So you talk about cultural humility. So what's the difference between cultural humility and cultural competence?
I just kind of threw up a little bit when you said cultural competence because
don't get it on the microphone.
Okay, it's not on the mic. So what instantly goes through my mind is some mindless education that I'm forced to do once a year where I just can't click the next button fast enough, right?
Oh,
That's
okay.
what cultural
Gotcha.
competence.
Cultural competence is another arrogant term. How can I ever be competent in a culture that's not my own? The whole idea that I can obtain competence creates part of the problem and some of the barriers because it's like, yep, I learned everything I need to know to take care of a Muslim patient. I'm all good. I'm an expert. It's that whole model that I've received the certificate, I'm checked off. I know exactly what I need to do, and it propagates this idea that in patient interaction where I walk in as the expert in you. I don't need to listen to what you have to say. I don't even need to be concerned with your concerns because I'm an expert. And cultural humility looks at it completely differently. Cultural humility, to begin with, cultural competence is one and done.
Okay.
I'm checked
that's
off.
A good.
Which it kind of fits with what you said earlier, though. The CRNA walks into the room. They say hello to the patient. I guess you do your pre-op. Sharon, you slip them a little Versed and you're done. So I go back to your point you made earlier. Is that really hard to change because of that reasoning?
I think this is a tool to do that because one of the central tenets of cultural humility is lifelong learning.
Gotcha.
So y'all have put together some kind of program at Wake Forest that you teach students. So you want to talk about your program that you have?
Yeah, when I took over a health assessment course a few years ago, and we were in the process of leveling up, if you will, to doctoral education from master's education. So we began to look at the objectives in all the courses and say, what is it that needs to be changed for this to transition from a master's level course to a doctorate level course? Well, a lot of D&P has nothing to do with anesthesia. So we began looking. We knew we had covered the COA essentials, but when we were looking at the doctoral essentials, it became evident that we weren't covering cross-cultural care at the level that would equal doctoral level education. And I began doing research, and, my kids would say, and I kind of felt this way myself, I'm the guy that needs to be hearing this and not the guy that needs to be teaching it. And I really started doing my own education in this realm. And honestly, the first thing I did think when I thought cultural competence was, another training module, right? And I came across a YouTube video on cultural humility, and it really resonated, this idea that, there is a difference. It is a lifelong learning. And the central tenets of cultural humility are self-reflection, addressing power imbalances. And I know that word probably freaks people out, but that really comes down to that, no, I'm not the expert in you. I'm not the expert in your culture. So as you guys mentioned, going in and doing that pre-op, we walk in, I'm the expert in anesthesia. I'm going to tell you what you need. Bye.
Yeah.
It's framing that a little bit differently. And then just that continual process of lifelong learning and honestly just being nice. When we think humility, it's like, okay, I'm not an expert in every LGBTQ issue. But if I walk in and I have a transgender patient, I don't know what pronoun to use.
Right.
It's like, just help me help you. I'm here to help you. Help me help you. And that's kind of one of the ways I view cultural humility is looking at things from a model. So what we did was we took this, and this was developed as a tool in the 90s. It's recently been defined as an actual grand theory, cultural humility. But taking this tool, and we created a curriculum thread using the tool of cultural humility. And it's basically the entire first year of the nurse anesthesia curriculum, which will be converting to the second year in doctoral education. And we have a series of 6 lunch and learns.
Oh yeah, I've taught
You've done
some
some
of
lunch
those.
and learns, yeah.
They're really cool.
The Department of
You've done
Anesthesia
'em too,
sponsored
right?
it, and we bring in speakers from different underrepresented groups in the community, and they come in and they talk about what are the disparities experienced in the Black community in Winston-Salem. What's the history of that? History is a big part of cultural humility. We talk about the eugenics program that was here in our own medical system. They talk about Highway 52 dividing the city and creating disparities. So, a lot of just education on what's going on in our local community within these underrepresented groups, and how can we contribute to not contributing to that? How can we not contribute?
Not be a part of the problem.
Exactly. And it's been tremendous. And I really began to see that, hey, in our profession, going all the way back to the health disparities and the issue of diversity, we have 55,000 CRNAs, 90% are me. 50% are me and 50% are you, right? Of that 90%, white males and females. We're not going anywhere.
Well, we will.
Eventually.
And you and I will.
Yeah.
Probably.
But pipeline
not
programs.
that many years.
You're right. I hope not that many years. Pipeline programs, that's a long game.
Yeah.
If we start changing the face of diversity, that's a really long game. So what's the short game? The short game is convincing you and I that we can make a difference and that diversity matters and that, as I said, we can make a difference in outcomes just by the way we treat people. And there's a lot of evidence on that. Dr. Edwin Aroke has looked at the difference in treatment of pain based on skin color, and it's astounding. 50%, there was a study where they interviewed medical students and I think new residents, and they asked them a single question: do Black Americans have thicker skin, and does that make them more resistant to pain? 50% of them said yes.
Say what?
What?
Well,
Wow.
And that leads to differences in the treatment of pain. It's been shown in the literature.
I know
so it's
we all
interesting.
harbor stereotypes, but
We do.
I mean,
Yeah.
just like Asians, it seems like you can cut their arms off and they'll just look at you.
In pain differences, yeah.
Like they just seem to.
Yeah.
And this just comes from years, and maybe it's a stereotypical thing that I've got in my head, but I'm not the only one. But I can see how we develop stereotypes. But I've never thought of the skin thing. Your skin is thicker or thinner.
Well, and we even teach things. There's a whole concept of race-based medicine where we teach that things are different based on race, when really it's a social determinant of health.
Right.
So that all comes into, that's all part of this program, is just having our students, at least, although we may not have changed the diversity very quickly, we can at least change their minds as they're entering the profession.
As I'm sitting here thinking through this as well, I think part of what you're talking about, I'm a big believer in your mind controls everything.
Yeah.
And
I'm with you on that.
If you're talking about pain and how you react to pain and control of that, again, there's some mind alterations that come in there as well, and that could be cultural. I haven't studied enough to know that.
But part of it would be cultural, Yeah,
because of what they've been through in their lives and how they've reacted.
What you've been taught. Could you imagine my daddy?
Yeah.
Oh my God! Yeah. If I cried, there better be blood, and there better be a lot of it.
Yeah. So I think the other part of this is another word that hasn't been mentioned yet is empathy and being empathetic, and that's something else that obviously people need to be aware of out there. And as we kind of talk about that,
what about 2020? After everything, one would think that we would be coming out of what the whole globe went through would be more empathy, but
I think we have less.
I think so, and I'm
more
not
divided.
I've not seen anything that actually quantifies that, But I just...
Well, I think there's two things to that, Sharon. I think we had this little election that just divided everyone from every political spectrum. I think the other thing is that people have been socially isolated. And when you're isolated, you don't have that interaction.
True.
And you can't find that empathy with people. So I think there's two reasons to that.
So do you think it's going to get better once people can have full body contact again?
No, we're not going down that road to full body contact.
But I mean, and whenever I say that, I mean hugging somebody,
right. Or shaking someone's hand. Is that going to be the norm anymore? I don't know.
We have to see people as... We have to recognize differences and embrace those. And unfortunately, I see culture going the other way.
Yeah.
Is that difference means cancellation or or just there's no longer an ability to agree to disagree or have civil debate or discourse. And that's sad. Cultural humility, though, I think compared to some of the other tools that we currently hear about in society, certainly offers that opportunity.
It's going to be interesting. It's a social experiment, to be sure.
Well, it is, and Sharon, I've heard you talk about millennials a lot and how they're not scared of anything. And, I think one of the things that I notice in being around millennials and younger people in general, my daughter who's 20 being one, is it really doesn't matter to them what color your skin is.
That's true.
It doesn't.
That is true.
It does not matter. I mean, what color your skin is, if, you've got someone who's black and married to a white person or an Asian, it doesn't matter to them at all.
That is true.
And, that is a step in the right direction. I think politically speaking, we have just become so hotly divided. You're wrong or you're right. There's no middle ground. And I don't know how we change that. I mean, that's one that just over time hopefully evolves and we get a leader that can bring everyone together. But
I have some thoughts on that.
Well, I'm sure you do. It's politics. So that's why I kind of led you into that.
Well, there is literature to support that women are better collaborators than men are.
Because of testosterone.
Well, it really messes y'all up. I just hate to tell you, because that makes you a fighter,
Right.
But they have proven that women are better at legislating and governing because they collaborate. A woman will try and find a similarity. I'll come in and I really like that top you have on today. A man would never do that.
Yeah, that's true.
So we'll look for similarities. And so my thoughts are, once we reach parity in representation, which would parallel what you're talking about with females in leadership positions, I think that some of this will get better. And of course, I'm speaking from my perspective.
Right.
And I'd love to hear what some of our listeners think about that.
That'd be a whole interesting podcast and topic in itself.
That's a series of podcasts.
Yeah, it really would be.
We might
Maybe even an open forum on something like that.
Might. Yeah, that would be a great idea.
Yeah. So no, I think that would be really good. Okay, so back to this point that we were talking about. I'm sorry to lead us down that road.
Today's show is brought to you by the folks at CRNA Financial Planning, an independent consulting firm that offers financial planning services exclusively to CRNAs and their families. From planning for a child's future college expenses to building a predictable income stream in retirement, the firm is committed to offering you comprehensive financial services, customized to fit your unique needs and objectives. If you have questions about your financial future, get them answered. Call the team at 855-304-3748. That's 855-304-3748. Or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com.
So, Richie, how do you become more culturally, we're going to call it humble. And then what would you suggest would be the takeaway for our CRNA listeners, who maybe, have been around for a while and they really haven't gone through this type of training? Again, for me, as I look at the younger CRNAs and SRNAs out there, they're getting a lot of this training. It's probably the CRNA who's been CRNA for a while who aren't getting this. So what would be some of the points you think that they should take away from this?
Certainly. Well, I think, recognizing that there are differences in outcomes that we contribute to, whether you see it or you believe it or not. Mm-hmm. The literature shows that. And, the idea that we can have identical provider patients when it comes to race, ethnicity, culture, that's never going to happen, right? But I, unlike society today, happen to believe that we can both recognize how far we've come and how far we need to go at the same time. Mm-hmm. So I think look at where have we've come a long way. As a profession. Yeah. But we still have a long way to go. And so recognizing both of those is important. Just doing some homework and not just that homework being Facebook.
Right.
Into how do I contribute to outcomes? What are the differences? It's amazing when I dug into the research to see differences in outcomes when you just look at providers. Kind of one of the landmark studies now is the difference in fetal outcomes based on the ethnicity, having same ethnicity providers for like pediatricians and obstetricians in underrepresented communities. And there's a stark difference. It's crazy.
Well, I was along that line, I was reading something about midwives, and midwives decrease maternal and infant mortality. Yeah. And what group has the highest mortality are women of color.
Absolutely.
But there is not a midwifery school anywhere in the country at a historically black college.
So there's a lot of differences there. And just realizing we do contribute to those. But I think going back to the idea of cultural humility and the theory that was published and developed recently, there's some background tenets, and those are we're diverse as a population. We are also, humans are inherently altruistic. I don't think people believe that anymore. We have equal value. Cultural conflict is normal and expected. That's a central tenet of this, that you say that it's normal and expected. And then devoting yourself to lifelong learning, really. And that learning begins with self-reflection. And that's really where this starts. And I think if there's a starting point for a practicing CRNA out there listening, that is taking a deep dive, thinking about my history. What are and I hate to use this term because it's been heavily politicized, but what are my implicit biases?
Yeah.
What are the stereotypes that I maybe even subconsciously believe? I grew up in a small, predominantly white, middle-class town in Tennessee, and then I went to college in Memphis, and I worked in trauma in Memphis in the crack cocaine heydays.
You saw a little bit there is what you're saying.
I did, but it put some implicit bias in my mind towards black males.
Right.
Because all I ever saw was a criminal element.
Right.
And then going beyond that, and I realized that later in life that, that bias is there. I never had friends or role models or saw black males in any other position in life, largely, that I was closely associated with. So that's something that I've had to change and grasp with and deal with. But I think looking at ourselves, and that's really where cultural humility begins, is that self-reflection. What is it that I may be doing in my practice every day that I don't even realize I'm doing in the way I treat patients differently? So starting with that self-reflection and then going, okay, I need to learn about this. Education, learning is free.
Yeah. Well, change can happen. Remember,
change can happen.
Our Declaration of Independence says all men are created equal.
Yeah.
Didn't say all men and women.
That is true. That is true. Yeah.
But just realizing that I'm not the expert in anybody but me, and I don't even know myself that well.
Oh,
right?
Lord. Maybe your spouse does.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think Pierce knows me better than I do. Then Jeremy knows me better than most people do.
Well, Richie, as we kind of wrap this up and conclude here, again, I'm just thinking, and, I'm thinking here we have this white male in the nurse anesthesia profession teaching about cultural humility and diversity. And I'm going to ask you, and I have a theory on this, but why are you teaching this?
Well, I fell into it. But once I got into it and I realized I am the problem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I start looking at this and it's like, I'm the person that needs to hear this.
Right.
And I started seeing in some circles and really after 2020 in society in general that there's a lot of people who promote themselves as social justice warriors, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at this space,
Yeah.
there's a lot of people out there, quite honestly, that just want to appear that they've reached some arbitrary level on the woke barometer.
Yep.
And they want everyone to see that. I'm waving the flags. I've got the signs in my yard, but I really don't care about change or doing anything. And it drives me crazy. And when I working in this space, it's like, okay, are we going to do something? Or are we just going to make the world believe that we're doing something? And there's a lot of that right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Every corporation in America
Very
wants
true.
to see that they're doing something. Everyone
Right.
to see they're doing, but are they really doing anything? So when I got involved in this work with, pipeline programs, outreach, and you start working with these kids. We just recently did a group through the School of Medicine in Wake Forest where, high school kids come in from all around the region and largely underrepresented, populations. And they just come in for the day and we tell them what we do. And we take them back and we do an airway lab and let them intubate. And of course, they're putting the tubes in backwards and laryngoscopes in their right hand. But
Yeah.
it's so fun to see them in there and see these young minds and think, you know what? This could change someone's future and change the future of their whole family
they're
dynamics.
seeing the possibilities.
They are.
Right. They're being exposed.
That's it. I mean,
Yeah.
It's just like, of course, I relate everything back to politics. It's just like whenever Kimberly and I did a webinar with these really powerful nurse legislators, and we had 50 nurses who looked at them and they saw that they could be them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing. It's not crossed their minds, the possibility I could be that person.
And
Right.
we're so often, we're just preaching to the choir.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's what is happening a lot, right?
Yeah.
So I represent the opposite of that. And my kids I have 3 daughters who are, all in their 20s, and they're like, Dad, what are you doing? You're just going to say something that's going to get you canceled.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. I mean, no, but I again, and that's kind of along the lines I was thinking, Richie. People like you and I and Sharon do need to be talking about this, even if we don't know everything about it, because we're going to screw up. We're going to say some things that aren't right, that somebody goes, wait a minute, you can't say that. But we're learning.
Right.
And I think that's the key. And that's what you're talking about is the idea here is, Sharon, your dad grew up completely different.
Oh, yeah.
And his parents grew up completely different. And I've said this before, we're not that far removed from slavery. We're not that far removed
and
from
recognizing that, hey, we have come a long way in a short period
of time. But it wasn't that long ago that, the civil rights movement happened and Martin Luther King
I remember
and
when
JFK.
our schools integrated busing.
Yeah. So,
I was going to school. I was in elementary school.
So we still have those in our head. And the more we talk about that and get it out, I have some really great friends that are, they're not like me at all, they're black and Asian and, culturally different, gay, it's just, but, and I have to learn from them when I spend time with them. And I think
Well-
that's kind of the key.
Well, I think what I hear you saying is there's got to be understanding on both sides.
Right.
You know, you may say something that somebody else finds offensive. Instead, we have a saying at work, I'm offended, I want an apology, and I want somebody fired. So, you know, instead of going
Yeah.
down that route, it's like, you know, that I really did not
Yeah.
appreciate that.
And maybe you just pull them aside and go, hey,
Right.
Sharon, you
Let
know,
me tell
I'm
you
a
how-
black
Yes.
male, and you said this, and man, let me just educate you a little bit.
Yeah.
This is not cool. I know you didn't mean it because you didn't really know it, but that's a much better way than going, oh my God, I'm going to HR on you because
That's
you
right.
just said this.
And I want
you
an
know?
apology, and I want you fired.
I was so
Exactly.
happy this week.
Because then that makes you, okay,
Yeah.
well then, there you go. I was right.
I don't know
Yeah.
if anyone saw it, but I was so happy to see a celebrity, Miley Cyrus, came
Oh,
out.
I saw that
And
yesterday.
there was a rapper who made some comments about people
Homophobic.
with, yeah. But instead of coming out and
DaBaby.
saying he should be canceled and forgotten about forever, she said, let me help you learn more about this. We
Right.
need
Would
to have a
think that-
conversation.
Who would think
Yeah.
that Miley would be
I
that
know.
big?
Exactly.
But it's maybe
Whoa.
there's hope in society that we,
Yeah.
as we progress, that people can realize that we
Right.
all have different starting points. Mm-hmm. We're not all going to change and become the social justice
Well-
warrior tomorrow. Yeah,
Yeah.
we all have different paths and different speeds along that path.
Well, there was just an issue in my industry
really?
with a lady who is a financial advisor. She's running this practice, and I'm not going to say names or where she was at, but evidently was looking to hire someone, and her staff had set up interviews, and she told one of her staff members that she didn't want any blacks coming in, and she had told her that, and there was evidently someone who was black who came in for the interview, and this staffer actually recorded her and sent it out on a TikTok.
Oh, wow.
Yes. And I mean, it obviously has upended her business, her
Sure.
broker-dealer affiliation. They terminated her affiliation.
Well, of
was
course,
it?
I
but-
want to fire you.
Right. And I mean, I don't know how her clientele are dealing with that, but again, it wasn't the right thing to say, but she's been totally canceled. And I don't know, what her background was, what the reasoning was. Was this something that she did all the time? Was it just kind of a one? So, the staff person basically turned her in, and
now
there
they
might
don't
have
have
been
a job either.
Well, yeah, exactly. And there might have been a better way to handle that. I
Sure.
wasn't there. I don't
Yeah.
know. It's not the right thing to do. But, could someone have, pulled her aside and said, hey, you know what? This is not right. Look at our office. Look at the situation we're in. Maybe you shouldn't be doing this, and made her think about this differently. But there are ramifications to things, I understand. But to Richie's point, I think the whole idea, and to your point, Sharon, is to start a conversation. When people aren't like you, don't look like you, don't dress like you, don't act like you, try to start the conversation that is, hey, where do we have some overlap, and how can you teach me about things and I teach you about things, and it just makes the whole world a better place.
And on that note,
Well, Sharon, this is your favorite
It
time
is.
of the podcast. So we're going to enter the lightning round. Richie, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right. Sharon, I'll let you start.
oh my goodness. So who's your hero?
I actually looked at that this morning, and I thought,
What if she
Sharon,
asked me that?
I don't have a single hero.
You got a
It's-
shero?
His wife.
I should say my wife. I'm gonna
There you
say,
go.
And many days.
Then the
that
3 daughters will be mad.
my daughters, but I look at people in society now, and I think maybe this is just me getting older. I hate to say that, but
It happens, dude.
I really love to see just everyday people making a difference. And, like recently, the Filipino Olympian that was just so proud of her heritage and stood up there. And I'm like, okay, she's my hero right now.
Yeah.
So my hero changes every day.
Oh, okay.
All right. Okay. So let me think here. Richie, what is your favorite song?
My kids they're shaking their heads right now. I'm going to have to say James Taylor, Fire and Rain.
Ooh,
Oh, good one.
That's a good one. If you could have had another profession, what would it be?
I've always been called out for how in the heck have you made it 25 years in the anesthesia profession? Because I'm not the type A,
Really?
in a box, analytic.
Yeah.
I probably an architect or a real estate developer.
Now, you know what I was going to say?
What's that?
I was going to say a travel agent or a food connoisseur because Sarah
would
used
be
to work
fun.
with Richie.
That would be so much
and
fun,
Richie would
actually.
always give her travel tips because he loves to travel, tell us places to go eat. In fact, we went to Florida and you had told Sarah about some restaurant or something down there. And I was like, who is this Richie guy you keep talking about? You know,
Okay, just changed my answer. How about concierge?
Oh, there you go.
Ah, there you go. That's good. That's good.
All right. I'm going to end on this one. Richie, if you won the lottery, what would you do?
I have an answer.
All right.
I've
All right.
actually met with my accountant many years ago to discuss this. And we developed a plan.
Okay. All right.
So
Why, do you play the lottery?
occasionally, but I would create a 501c3,
Okay.
and I would just pay myself very heavily to manage that. But
Yeah.
I like that.
but I would come up with some interesting and very worthy causes. I would find ways to give away money.
Yeah.
So you and Bill Gates would be buds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good answer. That's a good answer. You're not taking a big trip or buying a Ferrari
I would
or
do some
you
of
know.
those
Yeah,
things
yeah.
too. Yeah.
By the Queen Mary.
That's right. That's right. Well, Richie, thank you. Thank you for being on the show today, and thank you for all you're doing for the nurse anesthesia community and for your 25 years and for what you're doing at the school with those students. I know it's greatly appreciated in your innovator role over there. So,
Annie has to walk by my picture every day.
I do
on
see
the wall.
that often. We haven't done, our plan is to do some qualitative research. We have the students do reflective journaling as part of this
I had
process.
to do that at Yale.
But anecdotally, it's certainly been a great benefit to this. Just in the students dropping by my office and saying, you know what, I witnessed this incident
Yeah.
where somebody's being treated poorly based on skin color, and they intervened.
Yeah. They're paying attention.
They're paying attention.
Yeah.
They're
for
seeing
you.
things. So it's just that in itself is
Awareness.
worth doing it.
Yeah. Well, Sharon, I think it's a wrap.
I think so.
We want to thank our listeners for listening to Beyond the Mask with Jeremy Stanley. And
Sharon Pierce.
if you like our show and want to see us grow, Sharon, what are the best ways they can help us do that?
Like us, subscribe, tell your friends, put it on social media.
I'm glad you're not saying love us anymore. I didn't want to get any kind of,
Mushy stuff going
mushy
on.
stuff going on,
Shut up.
we're
After we were just talking about how the world needs more love.
well, it can be taken in a lot of different ways.
Oh,
I think
God.
that was a 70s song.
or the late
yeah,
60s.
yeah.
I don't know. All right, Sharon, we're in the top 50 medical podcasts in the country on our way to.
Number one.
All right. So until next time.
It's a wrap.
Have you thought about what would happen if you weren't able to work for 2 or 3 years? On average, 25% of people will file a disability claim, and most of us aren't prepared for that loss of income. Every CRNA needs to protect their biggest asset, yourself, and your ability to earn with a disability insurance policy. We recommend contacting Robert Smith, a master disability insurance specialist with more than 30 years of experience and 1,800 CRNA clients to find the coverage that fits you best. The best way to do that is to send him an email at rsmithjr@financialguide.com. That's rsmithjr@financialguide.com, or call him at 504-394-6557. Beyond the Mask is made possible by the team at CRNA Financial Planning. With almost 2 decades of experience, the firm guides CRNAs through the complexities of investing and financial planning. Schedule a free consultation today by calling 855-304-3748 or go online to crnafinancialplanning.com.
Hi, this is Jackie Rolls, President of the International Federation of Nurse Anesthetists and President and founder of Our Hearts, Your Hands, a global anesthesia support community that takes donations to allow nurse anesthetists in low and middle income countries to go to educational programs, buy equipment, or textbooks. Your donations are tax deductible, and we would appreciate your support.
OSA EMR is a free anesthesia EMR developed by CRNAs that you can download and use on an iPad. Our nonprofit mission is to make sure that solo and small practice CRNAs can digitally record their anesthetics. To learn more, visit osaemr.com to download and consider donating to our cause. Remember, for CRNAs, data is destiny.
Be sure to subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and anywhere you like to listen to shows. Also be sure to check out BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. Each episode is posted there with a corresponding blog post, and we timestamp important parts of the episode to help you quickly get to the content you're looking for. Also check out the special series section on the site. You can follow along and catch up on the CRNA History Series, episodes specifically about political conversations in the industry, or try the CRNA Personal Finance Series. It's all on BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And if you have a question for the show or want to be a guest, or even suggest a particular topic, fill out the contact form on the site or send an email directly to us at info@BeyondTheMaskPodcast.com. And lastly, let's take the conversation social. Check out our Beyond the Mask podcast Facebook page and Facebook group.